My parents abused me in childhood and locked me in the basement as punishment. When I grew up, they demanded money from me for a good upbringing. I never thought I'd be posting my life story on the internet, but here I am. I need to get this off my chest and maybe find some peace. So here it goes. Growing up, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. My parents, Mark and Susan, never seemed to show any affection toward me. From a young age, I felt like a burden to them. It's not just that they didn't show love, they actively went out of their way to make my life miserable. My earliest memory of their cruelty is from when I was about 5 years old. We were having a family gathering, and I was excited to show my cousins my new toy truck. My dad saw me playing with it and decided to use it as an opportunity to embarrass me. He grabbed the truck out of my hands and smashed it against the wall, laughing as he did so. "Toys are for babies, Ethan," he sneered. My cousins looked on, confused and a little scared, while my mom just watched with a cold, indifferent expression. School wasn't any better. I remember my first day of kindergarten vividly. I was nervous but excited to make new friends. As soon as we got to the classroom, my mom pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, "Don't embarrass us." Her words stung, but I tried to stay positive. That positivity didn't last long. My teacher, Mrs. Thompson, asked each of us to introduce ourselves. When it was my turn, I stood up and stuttered out my name. The whole class burst into laughter, and Mrs. Thompson did nothing to stop them. I went home that day with tears in my eyes, only to be met with my dad's scorn. "What did you do this time, Ethan?" he demanded. I tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear it. "Stop being such a crybaby," he said, pushing me toward my room. As I got older, the abuse only intensified. In middle school, I developed a love for drawing. It was my escape from reality, a way to express myself when words failed. One day, my mom found my sketchbook. She flipped through it, her face twisting in disgust. "This is garbage," she said, tearing out the pages and crumpling them up. "You'll never be good at anything, Ethan." I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Drawing was the one thing that made me happy, and she had destroyed it without a second thought. High school was a nightmare. My parents' verbal abuse continued, and they started to get more creative with their punishments. If I got a bad grade, my dad would lock me in the basement for hours. It was dark and cold, and I could hear the scurrying of rats in the corners. I would sit there shivering and crying, wondering what I had done to deserve this. My mom, on the other hand, would withhold food as punishment. There were days when I would go to bed with a gnawing hunger in my stomach because I had forgotten to do a chore or had talked back to her. School wasn't a safe haven either. The bullying I faced from my classmates was relentless. They picked up on my low self-esteem and used it against me. I was called every name in the book: loser, freak, weirdo. They would push me around in the hallways, knock my books out of my hands, and laugh as I scrambled to pick them up. The teachers turned a blind eye, and I was too scared to speak up. I didn't want to give my parents another reason to punish me. One incident stands out in my mind. I was in 10th grade, and we had a group project for science class. I was paired with 3 of the most popular kids in school, Jason, Mike, and Lisa. From the start, they made it clear that they didn't want me in their group. "Just stay out of our way, Ethan," Jason said. "We don't need you screwing this up." I tried to contribute, but every suggestion I made was shot down. When it came time to present the project, they didn't even let me speak. After class, I overheard them talking to Mrs. Carter, our science teacher. "Ethan didn't do anything," Lisa said. "We did all the work." Mrs. Carter nodded, and I knew I was in for it when I got home. My dad was waiting for me at the door, his face red with anger. "Why didn't you do your part?" he shouted. Before I could explain, he slapped me across the face. "You're worthless," he spat. I spent that night in the basement, crying myself to sleep. When I finally graduated high school, I thought things would get better. I was accepted into a university a few hours away, and I saw it as my chance to escape. But the damage had already been done. My parents' voices were always in the back of my mind, telling me I wasn't good enough. I struggled with my classes, constantly doubting myself. Making friends was nearly impossible. I was so used to being isolated that I didn't know how to connect with people. I kept to myself, spending most of my time in my dorm room, drawing and trying to block out the memories of my childhood. One day, I got a call from my mom. She never called unless it was to criticize me, so I hesitated before answering. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Your father and I are coming to visit," she said. "We need to talk." My heart sank. I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant visit. When they arrived, they didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You're failing, aren't you?" my dad said, his voice dripping with contempt. I tried to defend myself, but he wouldn't listen. "We didn't raise you to be a failure," my mom added. "You're an embarrassment to this family." They left me feeling more defeated than ever. The final straw came during my second year of university. I had started seeing a therapist, hoping to work through my issues. Dr. Reynolds was kind and understanding, and for the first time, I felt like someone was on my side. But when my parents found out, they were furious. "You're wasting your money on therapy?" my dad yelled over the phone. "We didn't raise you to be weak," my mom said. I tried to explain that I needed help, but they wouldn't hear it. "You're just looking for attention," my dad said. "Get your act together, Ethan." I was at my breaking point. I felt like I had no one to turn to, no way out. One night, I sat in my dorm room staring at a bottle of pills. I thought about ending it all, about finally escaping the pain. But something stopped me. I thought about Dr. Reynolds, about the progress I had made. I couldn't let my parents win. I couldn't let them destroy me completely. Instead, I made a plan. I would cut off all contact with them. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the only way to save myself. I changed my phone number, blocked them on social media, and moved to a different dorm. I focused on my therapy, on rebuilding my self-esteem. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up, but I kept pushing forward. Now, years later, I'm finally starting to heal. I've graduated from university, found a job I love, and made friends who support me. I still have bad days, days when the memories come rushing back, but I'm learning to cope. Writing this all down has been therapeutic, and I hope it helps someone else who might be going through something similar. Writing about my past was tough, but the encouragement and understanding from this community have been incredible. Today, I want to share the next chapter of my story, how I found a way to escape my toxic environment and start building a life for myself. By the time I was 16, the constant abuse from my parents had left me desperate for a way out. I knew I needed to become independent and find a way to support myself if I ever wanted to escape their control. My opportunity came in the most unexpected way. One day, while browsing through online forums, I stumbled upon a thread discussing various ways teenagers could make money. Among the typical suggestions like babysitting and mowing lawns, one comment caught my eye. It mentioned freelancing as a web developer. I had always been good with computers and had dabbled in coding a bit, so I decided to look into it. I spent hours reading articles and watching tutorials on web development. The more I learned, the more excited I became. This was something I could do. I set up a profile on a popular freelancing platform, listing the basic skills I had and offering to build simple websites for a low fee. At first, I didn't get any responses, but I kept refining my skills and updating my profile. My persistence paid off. After a couple of weeks, I received my first gig. It was a small project just setting up a blog for a local business. The pay was modest, but it was a start. I poured my heart into that project, working late into the night to make sure everything was perfect. When I finally submitted it, the client was thrilled. They left a glowing review on my profile, which helped me land more jobs. Word started to spread about my work, and I began getting more projects. I juggled school and freelancing, often staying up late to meet deadlines. It was exhausting, but the sense of accomplishment kept me going. Each completed project brought in more money, and I started saving up with a singular goal in mind escaping my parents' house. During this time, I made some important connections. One of my clients, David, was impressed with my work and introduced me to his friend, Rachel, who ran a small tech startup. Rachel needed a part-time developer and offered me a position. I was over the moon. Working for a startup was a dream come true, and it meant steady income and more experience. Rachel became a mentor to me. She taught me about the business side of tech, how to manage projects, and how to work with clients. Under her guidance, my skills improved, and I started taking on more complex projects. I also met other young developers through her network, and we formed a tight-knit group. We shared tips, collaborated on projects, and supported each other. One of the most significant moments came when Rachel decided to expand her startup. She offered me a full-time position once I turned 18, with a chance to move to a new office they were opening in another country. This was my ticket out. I worked harder than ever, saving every penny I earned. I was determined to be ready when the time came. During this period, my parents noticed the changes. They saw the money I was making and the time I was spending on my computer, but they didn't understand what I was doing. They assumed I was just wasting time online. My dad would often mock me, saying, "You think you're going to get rich playing on that computer?" I didn't care. I knew what I was working towards. The day I turned 18, I left without looking back. I had saved up enough money to cover my travel expenses and have a safety net for the first few months. Rachel helped me with the paperwork and relocation process. It was a whirlwind, but I felt a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. Moving to a new country was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had to adapt to a new culture, find a place to live, and settle into my new job. The first few weeks were a blur of activity. I rented a small apartment close to the office and immersed myself in work. The team at the new office was welcoming, and I quickly found my place among them. One of the first projects I worked on was a major upgrade for one of our clients, a large retail chain. The project was challenging, but I was determined to prove myself. I spent long hours coding, testing, and debugging. There were moments of frustration when things didn't go as planned, but I kept pushing through. When we finally launched the upgrade, the client was thrilled with the results. It was a huge success for the company and a personal victory for me. As I settled into my new life, I started exploring the city. I made friends both at work and outside of it. One of my closest friends, Alex, was another developer who had moved from a different country. We bonded over our shared experiences and often hung out after work, exploring local cafes and tech meetups. Alex introduced me to a larger network of developers, and I started getting involved in the local tech community. My career continued to grow. I took on more responsibilities at work, leading projects and mentoring new hires. Rachel's startup flourished, and we started expanding our client base. I also began working on personal projects, developing apps and websites that I was passionate about. One of my apps, a task management tool, gained some traction and even got featured on a popular tech blog. Despite the success, there were challenges. There were times when I felt overwhelmed by the workload and the pressure to constantly perform. There were moments of self-doubt where the voices of my parents would creep back into my mind, telling me I wasn't good enough. But I had built a support system. I had friends who understood and encouraged me, and I had Rachel, who always believed in my potential. One of the most pivotal moments came when Rachel decided to take the company public. It was a massive undertaking, and I was given a significant role in the process. We worked tirelessly, preparing everything for the IPO. It was stressful, and there were times when I doubted if we could pull it off. But we did. The IPO was a success, and it marked a new chapter for the company. With the success of the IPO, I received a significant bonus and stock options. It was more money than I had ever imagined having. I decided to use some of it to give back. I started a scholarship fund for underprivileged students who wanted to study tech. I also began mentoring young developers, sharing my journey and encouraging them to pursue their dreams despite any obstacles they might face. Looking back, it's incredible to see how far I've come. From that scared, abused child to a successful developer with a thriving career, the journey has been long and challenging, but also rewarding. I've learned that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always a way out. It takes courage, hard work, and the support of good people, but it is possible. Today, I want to share how my life continued to evolve, leading me to meet new people, expand my horizons, and eventually find love. After the successful IPO, life took on a new rhythm. With the financial stability and professional growth, I felt a newfound sense of freedom. My past was still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it fueled my drive to make the most out of my life. With a stable job and a supportive network of friends, I decided it was time to explore the world beyond my immediate surroundings. I had always dreamed of traveling, seeing new places, and experiencing different cultures. Now, I had the means to do it. My first trip was to Japan. I had always been fascinated by Japanese culture, from its rich history to its cutting-edge technology. I spent 2 weeks there exploring Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. It was an eye-opening experience. I marveled at the blend of ancient temples and modern skyscrapers, the bustling streets of Shibuya and the serene gardens of Kyoto. I even attended a traditional tea ceremony, which was a beautiful and meditative experience. While in Japan, I met a group of travelers from various parts of the world. We bonded over our shared love of adventure and curiosity. There was Emily, a spirited artist from Australia, Carlos, a tech enthusiast from Spain, and Priya, a journalist from India. We spent several days exploring together, and those friendships turned into long-lasting connections. We kept in touch, planning future trips and sharing our experiences. It was on one of these trips, a year later in Italy, that I met Mia. We were in Florence, and I was visiting the Uffizi Gallery, mesmerized by the art. As I stood in front of Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, I noticed a woman sketching the painting with incredible detail. Her concentration was intense, her movements graceful. I was captivated by her talent and found myself inching closer to see her work better. Mia was a freelance illustrator from Germany, traveling through Italy for inspiration. We struck up a conversation about art and quickly realized we had a lot in common. We spent the rest of the day exploring Florence together, talking about our lives, dreams, and passions. There was an immediate connection, something deep and genuine. Our friendship blossomed into something more over the next few months. We visited each other in our respective countries, taking turns showing off our favorite places and introducing each other to our friends. Our bond grew stronger with each visit. Mia's warmth, creativity, and kindness were like a balm to my soul. She understood my past without judgment and embraced me for who I was. I remember the day I knew I was in love with her. We were in Berlin, her hometown, walking through the Christmas market at Gendarmenmarkt. The air was crisp, the smell of mulled wine and gingerbread filling the air. We held hands, our breaths visible in the cold night. As we stood in front of a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, she turned to me with a smile that melted my heart. In that moment, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. Our relationship continued to deepen. Mia decided to move to my city, and we found a cozy apartment together. Living together was a new adventure. We learned each other's quirks, habits, and routines. We cooked meals together, decorated our home, and supported each other through the ups and downs of life. It wasn't always perfect, but it was always filled with love and respect. One summer, we decided to take a road trip across the United States. It was something we had both always wanted to do, and it turned out to be one of the most memorable experiences of our lives. We started on the East Coast, visiting cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and Charleston. We then made our way through the South, exploring the vibrant music scene in Nashville and the rich history of New Orleans. We had our fair share of adventures and misadventures. In New Orleans, our car broke down in the middle of nowhere. We were stranded for hours, waiting for a tow truck. It was a stressful situation, but we made the best of it, laughing and telling stories to pass the time. When we finally got back on the road, we were more grateful than ever for the simple things. As we traveled, we met countless interesting people. There was a retired couple in Savannah who shared their stories of traveling the world, a group of musicians in Austin who invited us to a private jam session, and a park ranger in the Grand Canyon who gave us a personalized tour. Each encounter enriched our journey, making it more meaningful and unforgettable. The pinnacle of our trip was reaching the West Coast. Standing on the beach in California, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life I had built and the people I had met along the way. It was there, with the sound of the waves crashing in the background, that I proposed to Mia. She said yes, tears of joy streaming down her face. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair. We invited only our closest friends and family. It took place in a beautiful garden in Tuscany, surrounded by olive trees and vineyards. Emily, Carlos, and Priya were there, along with our families and a few friends from work. It was a day filled with love, laughter, and joy. After the wedding, we settled back into our lives, but things were different now. We were no longer just a couple, we were partners in every sense of the word. We supported each other's dreams and worked together to build a future. Mia continued to pursue her art, and I kept growing in my career. One of the most shocking events during this time was when we discovered that Mia was pregnant. It was unplanned, and we were both taken aback. But as the news sank in, we embraced it with excitement and anticipation. The pregnancy brought us even closer together. We prepared for the arrival of our child, turning one of the rooms in our apartment into a nursery, shopping for baby clothes, and attending prenatal classes together. The day our daughter Lily was born was the happiest day of my life. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt a love so profound it brought tears to my eyes. Mia and I were exhausted but overjoyed. Our little family was complete. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges and joys. There were sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant worry that comes with raising a child. But there were also moments of pure bliss, Lily's first smile, her first steps, her infectious laughter. Every milestone was a celebration, a testament to the love and dedication we had for each other and our daughter. As Lily grew, we made a point to expose her to the world. We took her on our travels, introducing her to different cultures and experiences. We wanted her to grow up with a sense of curiosity and adventure, just like we had. It wasn't always easy traveling with a young child, but it was always worth it. Professionally, things continued to go well. Rachel's startup flourished, and I was promoted to a senior position. I took on more responsibilities, leading larger projects and mentoring new hires. I was proud of the work we were doing and the impact we were making in the tech industry. One of the most rewarding projects I worked on was a collaboration with a nonprofit organization. We developed an app to help connect volunteers with local charities and community projects. It was a challenging project, but knowing that our work was making a difference in people's lives was incredibly fulfilling. Through it all, Mia was my rock. Her unwavering support and love kept me grounded. She continued to pursue her art, gaining recognition for her work. Her illustrations were featured in several galleries, and she even published a children's book, which was a huge hit. As we navigated the ups and downs of life, our bond grew stronger. We celebrated our successes and supported each other through the challenges. We faced some difficult times, like when Mia's father passed away. It was a heartbreaking experience, but we leaned on each other and got through it together. I never imagined I'd have to revisit my past in such a brutal way, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when I thought I had escaped the darkness of my childhood and built a life of happiness and stability, my parents found me. What followed was a nightmare that tested my resolve, my integrity, and my courage. Here's what happened. It all began one sunny afternoon. Mia, Lily, and I were enjoying a picnic at a local park. It was one of those perfect days when everything seems to be going right. Lily was running around, chasing butterflies, and Mia was sketching the beautiful scenery. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something compelled me to pick up. The voice on the other end was cold and familiar. It was my father. My heart dropped as he began to speak. He had found me. He knew where I lived, where I worked, everything. He demanded that I meet him and my mother the next day, or they would make my life hell. My mind raced, thinking about how they could have tracked me down. I quickly realized that with the advent of social media and modern technology, it wasn't as difficult as I had hoped. I didn't want to tell Mia, but I knew I couldn't hide something like this from her. That evening, I sat her down and explained everything. She was shocked and worried, but her support was unwavering. We decided to consult a lawyer first thing in the morning to understand my options and prepare for whatever was coming. The next day, we met with Alice, a highly recommended attorney known for handling complex family disputes. Alice listened intently as I recounted my history with my parents and the recent phone call. She was sympathetic but also realistic. She explained that while my parents didn't have any legal claim to my earnings, they could still cause a lot of trouble if they decided to make false allegations or harass me and my family. Alice advised that we document everything and prepare for the worst. She suggested filing a restraining order if my parents continued their threats and harassment. Feeling somewhat reassured but still anxious, I agreed to meet my parents in a public place, with Alice nearby just in case things got out of hand. The meeting was set for a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, hoping to gather my thoughts and stay calm. My parents walked in a few minutes later, their faces twisted with anger and entitlement. They didn't waste any time. My father accused me of abandoning them and demanded that I start sending them money regularly. My mother chimed in, claiming they had supported me all my life and it was time for me to pay them back. I tried to stay calm and explain that I had built my life independently and owed them nothing, but they wouldn't listen. My father threatened to go to the police and accuse me of theft and fraud, knowing it would cause me significant legal trouble even if the claims were baseless. The situation quickly escalated, and I could feel my anger rising. I walked out, unable to take any more of their venom. Alice was waiting outside. She had heard enough to understand the severity of the situation. We headed straight to the courthouse to file a restraining order. I was emotionally drained, but knew it was the right thing to do. My parents were toxic, and I couldn't allow them to disrupt the life I had worked so hard to build. Over the next few days, things got worse. My parents began a smear campaign, contacting my workplace and even trying to reach out to my friends. They told outrageous lies, painting me as a criminal and a horrible son. Thankfully, most people saw through their deception, but the stress was immense. Mia and I had to reassure Lily that everything would be okay, even though we were both on edge. Then, one morning, there was a knock on the door. It was the police. My parents had made good on their threat and filed a report accusing me of stealing money from them. The officers were polite but firm, explaining that they needed to take me in for questioning. Mia was distraught, but I assured her it was just a formality and that we had nothing to hide. At the police station, I reiterated my side of the story, providing evidence of my financial independence and the abuse I had endured growing up. Alice was there, guiding me through the process and ensuring that my rights were protected. After several hours, I was released, but the ordeal had taken its toll. The next step was court. My parents had decided to sue me, claiming I owed them money for raising me. It was an absurd accusation, but they were determined to make my life difficult. The court date was set, and we began preparing for what felt like a battle for my very existence. In the weeks leading up to the trial, I immersed myself in work and family life, trying to keep a semblance of normalcy. Mia was my rock, her unwavering support giving me strength. We talked to Alice almost daily, gathering evidence and building a strong case. My childhood friends, who knew about the abuse, agreed to testify on my behalf, and I found solace in their support. The day of the trial arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. As we entered the courtroom, I saw my parents sitting with their lawyer, looking smug and confident. It took all my willpower not to confront them then and there. The judge entered and the proceedings began. My parents' lawyer painted a picture of loving parents who had sacrificed everything for their ungrateful son. It was hard to listen to, but I knew our turn would come. When it was Alice's time to present our case, she was brilliant. She laid out the history of abuse, presented evidence of my financial independence, and called witnesses who corroborated my story. One of the most shocking moments came when Alice introduced a surprise witness, my father's estranged brother, Uncle James. I hadn't seen him in years, but he had reached out to Alice after hearing about the case. He testified about my parents' neglect and abuse, adding credibility to our claims. It was a powerful moment that shifted the courtroom's atmosphere. The trial dragged on for days. Each evening I returned home exhausted, but Mia and Lily's presence kept me going. Finally, it was time for the judge to make a decision. The courtroom was tense as we awaited the verdict. When the judge ruled in our favor, declaring my parents' claims baseless and granting the restraining order, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. But the victory was bittersweet. My parents had shown their true colors, and there was no going back. I knew I would never have a normal relationship with them, but I had gained something far more valuable, a sense of freedom and the strength to protect my family. In the aftermath, life slowly returned to normal. The restraining order kept my parents at bay, and their smear campaign lost momentum. My reputation was intact, thanks to the support of my friends, colleagues, and most importantly, Mia. We decided to move to a new city, seeking a fresh start away from the shadows of my past. Our new home was a charming house in a quiet neighborhood. It was a place where we could build new memories and focus on our future. Mia and I continued to thrive in our careers, and Lily adapted well to her new school, making friends and enjoying her childhood. One unexpected but welcome outcome of the trial was reconnecting with Uncle James. He had distanced himself from the family years ago due to my parents' toxic behavior, but the trial brought us back together. He became a positive influence in our lives, offering support and guidance. His presence was a reminder that not all family bonds are destructive. As the years passed, I continued to grow both personally and professionally. I expanded my freelance business, taking on larger projects and even starting my own tech consultancy. Mia's art career flourished, and she held exhibitions in several major cities. We traveled often, both for work and leisure, and made it a point to expose Lily to as many cultures and experiences as possible. One of the most significant projects I undertook was developing a platform to help abused survivors share their stories and find resources for support. Inspired by my own experiences, I wanted to create a safe space for others to heal and rebuild their lives. The platform gained traction, and we partnered with various organizations to provide counseling, legal aid, and other essential services. Through the platform, I met countless brave individuals who had overcome unimaginable hardships. Their stories inspired me and reinforced my commitment to helping others. One particular story stood out: a young woman named Sarah, who had escaped an abusive household and was now an advocate for survivors. We became friends, and her resilience reminded me of the strength it takes to break free from a toxic past. I wish I could say that everything went back to normal after the court case, but life had other plans. Just when I thought my parents were out of my life for good, my mother decided to take her vengeance to a new level. What followed was a series of events that stretched over several weeks and tested my resilience in ways I hadn't imagined. Here's how it all unfolded. It started subtly. About a week after the court ruling, strange things began happening. It was small stuff at first: packages I hadn't ordered showing up at my doorstep, odd phone calls at all hours of the night, and strange emails flooding my inbox. At first I thought it was just a coincidence, but it soon became clear that someone was targeting me. One morning I received a call from my bank. They informed me that there had been several attempts to access my account from different locations. Thankfully, they had flagged the activity as suspicious and temporarily froze my account. I spent the entire day at the bank, verifying my identity and setting up additional security measures. It was inconvenient, but I was relieved that no money had been stolen. That evening, I sat down with Mia and recounted everything that had happened. We both knew in our hearts that my mother was behind this, but proving it would be another matter. We decided to document every incident meticulously and keep a low profile until we had enough evidence to take action. The next week, things escalated. I was served with a lawsuit claiming I had defaulted on several loans. The documents were filled with fabricated information, but it was enough to cause significant stress. I had to hire another lawyer to handle the bogus claims, and it took a considerable amount of time and money to clear my name. Simultaneously, my professional life was being attacked. Negative reviews and false allegations about my work started appearing online. Clients I had worked with for years began receiving anonymous emails claiming I was involved in illegal activities. It was damaging to my reputation and affected my business. I spent countless hours reaching out to clients, reassuring them, and working to remove the false information from the internet. Mia and I were also subjected to a barrage of harassing phone calls and messages. Some were from unknown numbers, filled with threats and vile language. Others were more insidious, pretending to be friends or colleagues to extract information. We changed our phone numbers, but the calls continued. It felt like we were under siege. One of the most shocking incidents happened when Mia's art gallery was vandalized. She had an exhibition coming up and someone broke in, destroying several of her pieces and leaving threatening messages on the walls. The police were called and a report was filed, but there were no immediate leads. The emotional toll on Mia was immense, and I felt a deep sense of guilt for dragging her into this nightmare. We installed security cameras around our home and took additional precautions, but the attacks continued. One night, while we were sleeping, someone threw a brick through our living room window. Attached to it was a note filled with hateful words and promising more violence if we didn't comply with their demands. The fear for our safety grew, and we knew we had to take more drastic measures. We decided to temporarily relocate. With the help of Alice, our attorney, we arranged for a safe house in a different city. It was a difficult decision, especially for Lily, who had to leave her school and friends behind. But our priority was keeping our family safe. We moved under the cover of night, hoping to evade any prying eyes. While at the safe house, I continued to work with Alice to gather evidence. We hired a private investigator to look into the harassment and gather any proof that could link my mother to the attacks. The investigator, Mark, was experienced and resourceful. He started digging into my parents' activities and connections, looking for any clues. Weeks passed, and the situation remained tense. We were constantly on edge, but there was a glimmer of hope when Mark discovered something significant. He found a series of encrypted emails between my mother and several individuals known for their involvement in illegal activities. These emails detailed plans to harass and intimidate me, confirming our suspicions. With this evidence, Alice filed for a restraining order against my mother and began preparing a criminal case. However, my mother wasn't going down without a fight. She retaliated by trying to discredit me in every possible way. She contacted news outlets, spreading lies about my past and portraying herself as the victim. The media picked up the story, and for a while it felt like the world was against me. We decided to take control of the narrative. I agreed to do an interview with a reputable journalist who specialized in exposing the truth behind sensational stories. In the interview, I shared my journey, from the abuse I endured as a child to the recent harassment by my mother. I provided evidence and witnesses to corroborate my story. The interview was powerful and garnered a lot of sympathy from the public. Public opinion began to shift in our favor, but the battle was far from over. My mother continued to escalate her tactics, and the tension reached a boiling point when she attempted to kidnap Lily. One afternoon, while Mia was picking Lily up from school, a car pulled up, and two men tried to force Lily into the vehicle. Mia fought them off, screaming for help, and several bystanders intervened, causing the men to flee. The police arrived quickly, and Mia and Lily were unharmed, but the trauma was deep. This incident was the final straw. The police intensified their investigation, and the pressure on my mother mounted. With the help of Mark, the private investigator, and Alice, we provided the police with enough evidence to arrest my mother and her accomplices. The legal process was long and arduous, but the day finally came when my mother was taken into custody. The trial was a media spectacle. My mother tried to paint herself as a loving parent driven to desperation by an ungrateful son, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Witness after witness testified to her abusive behavior and the harassment campaign she had orchestrated. The encrypted emails and the attempted kidnapping were damning pieces of evidence. The judge ruled in our favor, and my mother was sentenced to several years in prison. Her accomplices received similar sentences. It was a bittersweet victory. While I was relieved that the immediate threat was gone, the emotional scars remained. The betrayal by my own mother was a heavy burden to bear, but I was determined to move forward. We decided to make a fresh start. We sold our house and moved to a different city, far away from the memories of the past. Mia and I focused on rebuilding our lives and providing a stable, loving environment for Lily. We sought therapy to help us heal from the trauma and found solace in each other's support. In our new city, we built a community of friends who became like family. Mia continued her art career, and I expanded my tech consultancy business. We became involved in local charities and community projects, using our experiences to help others facing similar struggles. One of the most rewarding initiatives we started was a support group for survivors of family abuse. We provided a safe space for people to share their stories, find resources, and support each other. The group grew rapidly, and we partnered with organizations to offer legal aid, counseling, and financial assistance to those in need.